We'd like to give a special thank you to Pure Project for hosting the Society of Barley Engineers. Thank you.
Hello. Welcome to Pure Project. I wanted to start by saying thank you. Thank you so much for keeping beer culture alive and being here with us. I got my starts in a homebrew club up in Santa Cruz called the Zimmer Geeks, and I was the one 18-year-old kid in the group, and people never asked how old I was, which was probably a good idea. But we're here now. My name is Winslow Sawyer, for everyone who didn't get it. I'm one of the founders and the original brewer of Pure Project, and it's pretty crazy. You guys have followed us. We're almost like 9 years old now, and we have a bigger brewery, and there's a lot of barrels around us, which is really cool. But I'm lucky and to be talking to you about something that I'm very passionate about, which is mixed fermentation beer, and it seems like I'm around some like-minded people. I originally gave this presentation last year at the HomebrewCon, so some of you may have sat through it. I want to get kind of a crowd vibe. Would you guys like to get the long-winded version of this, or would you like me to go through it a little bit quicker and give you guys a personal tour of the brewery? Can I get a raise of hands for? A brewery tour? All right. Maybe we can try some beers off the Bright Tank too. We have a new experimental. We're part of the Brack Brewing program for NZ hops, which is the grower collective in New Zealand. We have a new experimental hop called NZ 109 that we just centrifuge today. It's all the brewers are drinking it after work, so I want you guys to try it and tell me what you think. So yes, here's the presentation. Oh no.
But you broke it already?
I originally gave this presentation with our education lead, Chris Leguzman. You may know him. He probably judges some competitions with you guys. He will not be here for this part. So the first part of this presentation was kind of his part where he talked about the history of lambic. So I will try to do his part justice, but I am not as eloquent as he is. I'm Winslow. Andy's going to come around and pour a couple things. I was able to bring out a couple beers for you guys. Our main beer is called Leaf, which we'll have a little bit later in the presentation, which is our 3-year blend. It was actually the first beer we ever brewed at Pure Project. Doug Odell, founder of Odell Brewing, is a friend of ours, and he kind of came for the first couple brews we had in Miramar, and he's like, "What are you brewing today, Winslow?" It's like, "Oh, I'm brewing some spontaneous lambic beer." He's like, "Okay, this kid's got it." But the first beer I'm sharing with you guys today is called Radiant Reverie. It is a blend of 2-year-old barrels. This is the first time we've done a blend that is just 2-year-old spontaneous beer, and then it has pluots and mangoes from our friends at Mission Trails up in Bradley, California. I always like the 2-year barrels the most, but it's hard to stock up enough of them to be able to make a unique blend of it. It's always kind of the most focused of them all, but we can talk about blending later. Leaf, I'll talk about later when we bring that around. So yeah, a scope of lambic culture throughout history. As I said before, this was Chris's part of the presentation, so I'll try to do it justice. Lambic is a very old style of beer. There are other styles in lambic that are spontaneously fermented, but we'll talk about where the world of lambic is now, because it's come a long way. Lambic was originally the drink of farmers and the champagne of Brussels. Napoleon called it the Champagne du Nord, as he was marching his troops through Belgium. Fast forward a little bit to the 1800s, and pasteurization, isolation, changed the way all beers were made, and people started focusing a lot more on single culture beers, which is where a majority of our beers are nowadays, right? And a lot of the things that I think a lot of classic styles through time were always steered by governmental regulations. Here in America, we have crazy high ABV beers because we don't pay taxes based off of how high ABV things are or how big our mash tun is, like in Belgium. So a lot of these old world styles, you can see a lot of weird kind of coincidental things where people brew low ABV beers in England because they're taxed on the size of their mash tun, or Belgium, they're filling up their mash tuns to the brim and doing very turbid mashes to be able to maximize the amount of sugar that they're getting out of their wort. Other styles were made, and especially as like the 1970s came, things changed a little bit. Coca-Cola came to Belgium and changed the way everyone wanted to drink beer. People wanted sweet drinks, so Rodenbach, the originators of Flanders Red, started pasteurizing their beer and back sweetening it. And the idea of goose and dry farmers' beer was kind of lost to that. Oh yeah, I'd love some. That's not my glass. I think my glass is over there. But in 1910, they were brewing 850,000 U.S. barrels of lambic, which is pretty incredible. But by the 1970s, is dying. Today, there's only 11 lambic breweries and 5 blenders, and it's viewed as a rare style in the grand scope of everything. Lambic culture is definitely cemented a place in beer nerds' minds. I'm guessing all you guys are beer nerds, so I'm speaking to the choir. But lambic festivals, people stashing beers in their closets. I think lambic and goose are definitely those the type of beer. It's meant for saving. The Belgian government required the brewers there to put a best by date on their bottles, and they put it 50 years in the future of when they bottled it, just to kick it to the curb. But there's also American interpretations. I don't think any of us really like to call it goose here. A very important part of spontaneous beer and lambic culture is that it is a beer that is about a place, right? Our fermentation cultures come out of the air, and it's a representation of time, place, local ingredients. So we definitely don't want to pull away from what the Belgians are doing. So there have been talks in the past, like a few other breweries were working towards a thing called Méthode Traditionnelle. I think that's kind of died since COVID. I don't know what's going on with it. I wish I could give you more information, but it's kind of a set of guidelines where production techniques, and it's kind of almost like a promise to the customer of how things made, almost like bourbon, right? It's made from a corn mash, and it's aged for 4 years in a new barrel. We're trying to do that type of education without taking away from the original producers, because for us, we feel like we're insulting the Belgians if we call our product lambic, right? There's a really cool documentary that just came out. We had the first showing here at the brewery. It's called Bottle Conditioned. If you guys haven't seen it, do you guys have sound on this? Yes. Have you guys seen? Can I get a show of hands who have seen this movie? Oh my gosh, you guys are in for a treat. This is like the only, like this and Fox and the Hound. Just cry every time I see this movie. Let's see if the YouTube. Let's see what kind of ad we'll get. No ad. You guys got sound? No. It's in French. It doesn't really matter. You guys definitely need to go out and see this movie, though. It's great. It's on Vimeo, I think. Great watch.
No, it doesn't sound
Nothing.
like it's coming out. Yeah.
Okay. Well, look this up. It's called Bottle Condition. It's by a local director named Jerry Franck. He worked directly, taking footage in Cantillon, Drie-Fonteinen, a lot of really pivotal stuff that was going on. The Shelton Bros are in the movie before they closed. So a lot of pivotal stuff about beer culture and lambic culture. Really cool. This doesn't work now. No! Did I turn this off?
No, it's because we...
And this is why I make beer instead of working on computers. We still have manual everything in the brewery. We haven't gotten too big.
Try now.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the important part. This is the part of the presentation I actually give. How to make your own versions of this historical style. So I think, like I was saying before, this is a very much a thinking beer. You know, you can taste a beer that, you know, was made years ago and take you back to a place that you were, whether it was a place in your life or a place that you lived. So think about, you know, the terroir, of where you're living, where you're getting ingredients from. And like I said before, it's about illusion and not imitation, right? We're not trying to imitate what Cantillon. I don't want to make Cantillon here. I want to make pure project beer. But I want to make it with intention, and I want to have the story there. And brew with what's around you. So this, all of our spontaneous base is brewed with Pilsner from Admiral Malting, so grown in California, and then raw wheat from the growers that grow for Admiral Maltings. And WWBD, it's always, what would the Belgians do? So, are you going to sanitize your fermenter? No, you're just going to hose it out with water. Your equipment, ingredients, and location is what makes your beer unique, right? Whatever makes it special to you is what's going to make it so important when you share it with someone else. It's great if it tastes like Cantillon, but it's so much better if it tastes like your beer. And I think that goes a long way for, you know, everyone homebrewing. And water profile. Homebrewers are water nerds. We don't do anything with our water, really. We don't use RO. We use our municipal water supply, and we will add salts on top of that. We have very hard water in San Diego, but I think that's something that makes all of the beers that we make very unique and not replicable by other people at other breweries. So, as I was saying before, grain selection, sourcing. I don't know if you guys have access to Admiral malts. That's awesome. So sourcing your malt is a big piece of it. The beer is really, you know, whatever you're pulling out of the air and the grain that you're putting into it. It's not a flavored drink. You're not going to be dry hopping the beer. So highlighting local malting companies is awesome. This is the malting floors of Admiral up in Alameda. They're growing, which is great to hear. But the traditional grain bill is 60% Pilsner malt and 40% unmalted wheat. The gravity that we target is 12.5 Plato. You guys specific gravity fans or Plato? Specific gravity? So multiply it times 4, divide it by whatever, and carry the 5. And then we're not doing pH adjustment in the mash. So most of the beers that we're making, we're adding acidulated malt to drop our mashes to 5.2. These mashes, we're not doing any adjustment. You want high pH so you can get a lot of Maillard reaction in the boil, right? You want to be able to create as complex of sugars as possible. An extended boil also helps to create those complex sugars. So we boil this beer for 3 hours, which gives it a lot of color. So a lot of our silo malt is a Pilsner malt as well. So if you're, you know, drinking the Helles off tap, that's, you know, Wireman Extra Pale. That gives you a kind of comparison about it. It turns a much more golden color over the course of that boil. So boiling goes a long way in not only our lambic, but like our imperial stouts. We're doing very extended boils on those to get very complex sugars that you can't get from just crystal malts or mashing. Traditionally, for hops, they were done with 2.5 pounds per barrel of aged hops. The very first batch of lambic-inspired beer that I brewed as a home brewer, oh man, that was like 14, 15 years ago. I did that. It was terrible. It was way too hoppy. Maybe my my hops were not of low enough alpha before they were aged, but it was too much. So we're probably about half that for this beer. And then we add a little bit of non-aged hops to know that we're getting at least 10 IBUs from just some T90s at the beginning of the boil. A big thing of what we're trying to go for, at least in our spontaneous beers, is very low acidity, especially because we want it to be a base for fruited versions later on. So if you taste the Radiant Reverie that's going on right now, it has it's an acidic beer, right? Andy will probably bring around the 3-year blend, and you can see the difference of just what not adding fruit does for the acid profile. We age a lot of hops in our barrel warehouse down at our Miramar brewery. So we're not doing our spawn brewing here. It's our old brewery in Miramar. Pretty much anytime we open like a bag of hops and we're like, this probably shouldn't go in an IPA. Yeah, it smells like cheese. Then we just put it on a rack in our warehouse, and we have a very cheesy smelling warehouse, but they come out great in beers. Yes?
This sounds like a silly question. Are you using whole hops?
The question is, are we using whole hops or pellets? We're using aged pellets, but the first few batches did have whole hops in them. They're just really hard to get now. They're hard to find. They're bulky. The hop processors are they're not wanting to keep it because their walk-ins aren't big enough to hold all the hops. So also the hops will give you a lot of your character of your beer when you're using it at 2.5 pounds per barrel. Hot side is a lot, right? So it's going to give you a lot of character. So definitely go the extra mile and select hops that give you the character that you're going to want. So tobacco, hay, cheese, the Parmesan, Gouda. Go for what's going to make you happy with your beer, because the hops we found, as compared to fermentation in IPAs, they don't biotransform the same way. You're pretty much getting out what you put in with your aged hops. You're not going to get, your thiol biotransformation. Your tobacco is not going to turn into beautiful passion fruit at the end of it. Cool ships, knockout, and location. So yeah, choosing a cool ship, but you want to make sure you're maximizing the surface area so it'll cool down. We have pretty high ambient temperatures here in San Diego, even in the winter. We're usually brewing these beers between January and March when it's the coldest, but it's still not snowing outside like it is in Belgium, right? So we want to make sure we're able to cool that beer down in time. Our batches are like 300 gallons, so a little bit bigger than probably what you'll be doing at home. But you want to make sure you maximize the surface area so you can have as much contact with the air and the microorganisms that are there. Definitely recommend stainless steel or copper for your cool ship. If you go hot into, like, let's say an oak barrel or something like that, you're going to pull out a ton of tannin and flavors that you don't want. So you want something that's inert. Cleaning and sanitizing, just make sure it's clean. In all of our spontaneous production, we're not doing any chemical sanitizers. The only thing that we're sanitizing would be our barrels, where we're steaming our barrels before, just because we don't want any leftover microorganisms in there to get in the way of our unique year of spontaneous brewing. When we're knocking out, we knock out vigorously so we can get natural aeration. We're not adding oxygen in our wort stream. And then you can acidify your wort after down to about 5.2, and that can help prevent some of the butyric things that can happen at first. I've heard mixed feelings about this. There's been a lot of experiments done whether it does or anything or not, but when you've got 300 gallons of beer and you're worried if it's all going to turn to crap, it's definitely the first time we did spawn beer at the brewery. It's very nerve-wracking. I'm sure you guys have had this experience where you brew beer and 72 hours later you don't see anything going on. It's like that with spawn beer, and it's every time, and now I just have to be like patient because if that was happening in the brewery, coming in after, next morning after knocking out and wasn't seeing fermentation, I'd be like, okay, let's bring out the big guns, let's go grab some yeast off another tank or whatever. But you just have to be patient and let it do its thing. And it's weird. Every year, we'll pull off kind of what we call like the farrow, which is the unaged version that's just still off the barrel. And sometimes it tastes like a little bit like wit. Sometimes it tastes a little bit like Hefeweizen, but it always has kind of some wild yeast esters to it, some banana and clove, and it's kind of unique to see. Your cooling location will definitely determine the microorganisms you're getting. One year we took our cool ship up to Mount Laguna and camped in the snow with it. That beer took almost like 5 days to start fermenting, and definitely had a different quality to it than the beers that we cool at our Miramar facility. Yeah, I put the cool ship in the back of my truck and we drove it up and went camping. Yeah, it was pretty cool. Yeah. So we've done different locations around town. We did one at the beach. We did one here and there, but we haven't gotten out much since COVID, unfortunately. So this is our barrels in our brewery, and you can see after about 48, 72 hours, the barrels are going. Yeah, pretty cool. And then sometimes what will happen is if we have like a batch that seems like it's really not starting to go, I'll like rack some krausen into another barrel, and that can help like kick off fermentation in another one. We ferment in the final aging vessel. So, you know, the beer in this barrel is where it's going to sit for the next 1 to 3 years. It's going to sit on all the lees and, you know, all the flavors that come from sitting on italicized yeast. And like I said, be patient of lag time. The other thing we do is we leave headspace. These barrels we're only filling, you know, 2/3, 3/4 full. And that's so we can top them up after fermentation, not making like a huge mess everywhere. Try the Faro. It tastes different every year. And then a big thing with your barrels is just try not to sample them too much. Surprisingly, we very rarely try our barrel-aged beers. We purposely do that because it's more chance for getting oxygen into the barrels, more chance to infect it. Just be patient. Like all these barrels are full of beer. It's pretty crazy. And we'll set it up when we're like racking. These are all clean barrels. These are all Imperial Stout in these barrels. But the time we usually try all the barrels is when we're getting them set up to rack the barrels, and we're just making sure there's nothing wrong with them. That's usually what we're looking for, right? These are the active organisms. I love this graph. I'm kind of a graph nerd. But this shows a lot of what's going on in the fermentation over the first 2 years of aging, right? So a lot of the action is happening these first like 2 months. But you see, we've got like Enterobacter in here, which is like stuff you really don't want to be enjoying in your beers. But you can see that like dives off really fast as the pH drops and ABV goes up. This is, if you guys haven't read the book, the Lambic book, the classic styles like Lambic book, this is in there. It's I don't know. I like this graph. Aging and adjuncts. I think this is another opportunity to really showcase the ingredients around you and your methods as a brewer. These are peaches from Blossom Bluff orchards up in the Central Valley. They're an organic stone fruit orchard that we get fruit from every year. Your vessels to age in will be very important. You're probably not brewing a full 60 gallons to fill a Bordeaux barrel, except if you are with a group of people, right? So we're looking for neutral steamed wooden barrels. Our first couple batches of Leaf, our 3-year blend that's getting passed around now, that came out, the first couple batches definitely had oak character to it. So it takes a lot longer than you think to get the oak character out of barrels. But because of that, if you're not trying to have oak present in your spontaneous beer, carboys, glass and plastic ones work very well for that, to get a neutral character. Supposedly, plastic carboys give the same kind of oxygen transmission as oak barrels do. So I was never a big fan of plastic, except they're harder to break when you're home brewing. But supposedly they're really good for aging mixed fermentation beer. And then I would recommend against buckets for aging, long-term aging, just because the surface area is really high and there's no way to really make sure it's filled to the top. For fruit, you don't really need to do as much blending, whereas with the base lambic itself, you have to have a really good barrel of straight lambic, and then that usually means that you're not going to blend it with other stuff, and then you end up with kind of mediocre things that you blend down sometimes. So the nice thing about doing fruited spontaneous beer is that you don't really need to blend. So you could take a single carboy, add fruit to it, I always recommend really extra ripe fruit. You know, it's kind of like making banana bread. You're gonna get a lot more flavor out of really ripe fruit than you're gonna get out of like fresh, like really bright fruit. Dried fruits can work really well too, but they'll add ABV. So sometimes when we're working with stone fruits, like peach is a really hard character to get out of fruit just because it's so much water inside of peaches. So we'll actually add dried peaches sometimes to help boost the intensity. So using a blend of both dried and fresh can help sometimes in that expression. But there's all kinds of other things you can add to it. There's, you know, it's home brewing. I kind of approach this very much like home brewing still, where it's like you can really do anything. And I think, you know, Cantillon and Swansea Day has proven that you can make all kinds of different spontaneous beers. So different barrel types, biotransformation and degradation of hops are really big things, but it's a really good opportunity to release your inner artist. So this is our blending table when we're doing the 3-year blend. So each one of these glasses are samples from a different barrel that we're pulling from. So you can see here we've got our 1 year, we have our 2 year, and our 3 year, and then this is last year's. So tasting it against our blend last year to try and keep things consistent as we're going year to year. The crazy thing about blending a 3-year blend is the individual pieces never taste anything like what the final blend does. And every year I get to the table and start sampling them, and I'm like, there's no way it's gonna taste similar this year. Like, oh, it's too acidic, or we don't have enough funk in it. And then somehow you pull out some different things and blend them together, and then we're like, wow, it worked. What we notice a lot is that the 1 year usually is not as dry. It has more residual sugar left in it and doesn't have the acidity. The 3 year, I mean, you can see how dark the 3 year is, right? It will have a lot more oxidative qualities to it and usually is more acidic. I'm not a big fan of the 3 year, but the 2 year is always my favorite. It's gone kind of through its full maturation phase, I would like to say, where it gets to full dryness. The acidity hasn't really taken over too much. So you guys got to try the first one. It had fruit in it, so it kind of pulls away from what the actual barrel base was like. But it's all about just trying. And you can't take all the good barrels. That's always the hard part too, right? You're like, oh, I love all these ones. But sometimes what you have to ask yourself is, which one of these can age for another year, right? So a lot of the time we're initially going through all of them and just rating them on a scale of 1 to 3 of acidity. Either it's minus, neutral, or plus for acidity. And then we'll kind of try and make a blend. We can't take all the medium acidity stuff because we need to turn into maybe higher acidity things later. So there's kind of a lot of planning that goes into it. And the hardest part is making a consistent product year after year, right? It's easy to do a good blend once, but making sure you set yourself up for success the next time is the big picture thing. Bottle just as normal. Our kind of rule of thumb is we do 1.1 ounces per gallon of cane sugar. I'd like to get them more spritzy, but we have issues at our tasting rooms if we carbonate them more, and everyone complains. That gets us a nice like 2.6, 2.7 volume CO2. We will sometimes make yeast starters where we'll take some wort from what we're brewing and some of the beer that we're blending and potentially sometimes add some acid to it and then make a yeast starter with that to kind of get the yeast acclimated to the lower pH climate. We don't usually need to do it with our spontaneous stuff because it's lower acid, but if we have a pretty acid forward fruit beer, definitely making a yeast starter is really helpful. The other thing we see is when we first bottle our 3-year blend, it takes time for the 1-year-old component of it to fully ferment. So after 2 months is usually when the beer's not bottle sick anymore. All your diacetyl and THC and all that's gone away. But it still has some body left to it. And then over the course of a year, warm storing is when we will see it get a little bit more carbonation, is that the sugars from the young beer is eaten by the older beers and gives it more effervescent body. So it's really cool to see the transition over the course of a year and 5 years, 10 years of how the beer will develop. But the biggest change we usually see is in the first year. If you guys are keg conditioning, all of our mixed firm beers are all keg conditioned. Leave a little headspace in the keg. For some reason, it doesn't carbonate if you fill them up all the way. And be patient. Mixed fermentation, there's a lot of things going on. PDO is creating diacetyl, then the Brett needs to eat that, but then the Brett puts off a weird thing that the lacto needs to eat, and it's like this kind of weird cycle that all the organisms need to play together well. Definitely different than making a single strain beer. This is us in Mount Laguna with the truck. So just a recipe recap. We target about 12.5 Plato, 60% Pilsner, 40% unmalted wheat. We do a step. I think I might have missed the thing on turbid mashing. Turbid mashing is a very important part of the recipe. I'm not sure if that got taken out of the presentation or not. I skipped over it. I'm sorry. I'm going to go back. This is very important. There we go. Turbid mashing. Turbid mashing is very important. So it's a step mash where we're removing portions of the mash and boiling it. So we're only doing 3 steps in our turbid mash. So we're mashing it at 136 degrees and then doing a turbid step to 152 degrees, and then we do another step to 165 to mash out. The classic temperature steps are the ones shown there. It helps convert the unmalted wheat, and it also helps to create and promote a lot of those complex sugars that take years and years to ferment in the barrels. The problem, Are you boiling just the liquid or liquid and the grain? Liquid and grain, yeah. We're boiling liquid and grain.
Almost like a decoction?
It's like a decoction, yeah, exactly. It's kind of scary. You always think you're going to stick the mash, especially when it's like 40% raw wheat. But for somehow it works. It louders. We don't add, rice hulls or anything. Luckily, it's a pretty low gravity beer, so we're not like filling our mash tun way up. I would get a lot more scared if it was filled to the top. And then another piece of that is a very hot sparge. It helps to stabilize the starches from the wheat, and you also are able to pull out some of the tannins from the grain husks and the wheat itself. Very important part. Sorry, I skipped that. So the long boil and turbid mash and spontaneous fermentation are really the 3 cornerstones of what make lambic style beer what it is. I hope. Sorry to go backwards so far.
So when you say hot sparge, are you talking 175?
Yeah, almost boiling, like as hot as you can get it. We have an on-demand water heater that we're sparging with, so it goes up to 185. But you could use almost boiling water. Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. Oh, this is Cantillon's mash tun. So yeah, super steampunk. It's run with like leather belts that run off of, run by horses. It's pretty cool. Yeah. Most important part, enjoying your beer. Share beer with your friends. Food and beer is culture. And I think that's something that you guys are doing as a club and really keeping things alive. So thanks so much. Feel free, any questions, but I'd love to get you guys in the back and show you around a little bit. I'm sure you guys will have some more questions about things back there. Yep.
I got a question.
It was me.
All right, my question was, between those 3 steps, doing the longer boil, the turbid mash, and the higher temperature mash out, which one would you put as like the most important one to achieve the goal of creating those longer chains of?
You could probably skip the turbid mash, just mash really high, and then boil for 3 hours. That helps a lot. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. For every hour that we boil our beer in normal single culture beers, we're seeing usually a Plato or two higher residual, 1.004 higher residual gravity. So our stouts will boil overnight. Yeah. Yeah.
For sour beers, wild fermented beers, beers that people are not used to, how do you introduce people that are not expecting that character to the beer and get them to appreciate it in a relatively short time?
Yeah, I think fruit is always the way to introduce things to people. It's important for them to know that, the fermented character of a fruit is different than the eating the fruit. Like comparing the taste of a grape to the taste of wine is very important for people to realize, okay, so if I'm having a mango beer, it shouldn't really taste like eating a mango, right? It's hard to turn people on to goose. Goose is a very acquired taste. I feel like it's one of those things you either love it or you hate it. I remember the first time goose I had, I was like, I think this beer is infected.
For your long boil, do you just plan ahead and do a bigger volume so it boils down, or do you re-add water as you boil along?
We plan ahead the volume. We know our boil off rate from our kettle. I know it's a little bit tougher on a homebrew system. Sometimes you'll have those like really rigorous boils where you're like, oh, we boil off a significant amount. Most of our beers will water back at the end of. This is actually kind of weirdly the only beer we don't water back at the end. It helps a lot on the commercial brewing side to cool down the wort just a little bit to help get through the pumps, because you'll end up cavitating your pumps and have to run them really slow when it's at boiling. It'll boil in the head of the pump as you're pulling negative pressure on it. So I'm all for adding water at the end, but this is the one beer we don't do it on.
We've got a couple Zoom questions here real quick.
Yeah.
One is, do you use hops in the mash?
No, we haven't. We've done hops in the mash on other beers, but not this one. No hops in the mash. But definitely some other mixed room beers. We've done hops in the mash.
Yeah. And Ryan wants to know if you've ever used Matsumoto Farm stone fruit.
Yeah, we have used Matsumoto Farms stone fruits, but we actually found that Blossom Bluffs, people are probably going to hate me for the thing, is we like the character better in our beer. Matsumoto peaches are like the best for eating, and they are so pretty and so perfect. I think they're awesome probably when you're in your like Michelin star restaurant and you're having it with your dessert, because they're just so pretty. But the Blossom Bluff peaches just have so much more intensity of flavor. They're not as pretty, but they make such good beer. We'll have a method traditional 1 year peach coming out next month. So yeah, from this year's peaches. Cool. All right, who wants a tour? Awesome.
For this group, freaking nails it.
Awesome. Well, if you guys want to copy the presentation, I'm sure you guys can share it around.
I was there at
Yeah.
conference for it, and it was good to hear. He actually took it the second time because
Yeah.
it was, a lot of the stuff he was hearing exactly what you're doing is needed to hear it twice.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely like spontaneous beer is definitely one of those things where it's half science, half just like kind of going for it and feeling it, which I really like about it. So we can start at the silo. We just got a silo, which I'm super excited about. It took me like a year and a half to get the permits for this damn thing. So we just got a silo. This came to us from a BJ's in Arizona. California was not happy that it didn't have seismic engineering drawings done for it, so I had to spend a long time tracking down the original engineering group that designed this in Minnesota, and they had to redesign the whole thing for me in CAD so I could show it to the city of Vista. So that was fun. But now we have it. It holds 50,000 pounds of Great Western Pilsner, which is our kind of house base malt that we use for everything. This is our spent grain bin here. If you have noticed, we do not have a back to our brewery. There's only the front. We have a hill behind us. So all of our utilities and nasty smelling grain we have to keep out here in the front, unfortunately. But the one nice thing is we know the grain all goes to California Valley Center, which is nice. This is these are dunnage, so like the pallets that all the cans come on. So we have to like save these up and send them back to Ball. So kind of all the stuff that gets stored out here. But very excited to have this silo. The wood fence is new, yeah. So that was part of the silo installation. It's been really great. We were milling like 8,000 to 10,000 pounds of grain by hand every week. By hand, yeah, bag by bag. Well, not cranking the mill, but every 55-pound bag, like holding it up onto the mill. So as you can see, there's an auger that takes the grain up and around and over. As you can see, the pipe turns black in here. So you can follow it around, and we had to kind of route it over to the mezzanine above the tasting room is where our original grain storage was. Group might be a little too big to take up there, but we have a grist case up there in our mill. You can kind of see it over the tasting room. We were doing our grain storage up there. Luckily now we don't have to keep all the pallets of base malt up there anymore. We'll get to the canning line, but we can go over here. We purposely designed the cold box a little bit shorter so we could keep cans on top of it. Cans are weird where you have to order full truckloads at once. So you have to order 25 pallets at a time because there's like a special truck that brings them to you. So we purposely built the cold box a little bit shorter, but follow me up here, come on. I'll find out where the lights are. Where are the lights? Forgot where the lights are. I'm never the first one here in the morning anymore. Our first brewing shift starts at 6. Where are the lights? Oh man, where did we put those? They might be over here. Sorry, give me 1 second. Oh, you know what? I think they're actually over here. It's weird. So this was Iron Fist before, as you know, and it was divided up into kind of like 3 units. So we kind of integrated the whole thing, but now the light switches are all over the place because there's 3 different sub panels because there's 3 different warehouses here. So I'll be right back. I think they're over here. Nope, not those ones. Man, where'd they stash these bad boys? Oh, here it is. Ah, I knew that. Yeah. All right. So lights on now. So over here we have the brew house. This is the original Iron Fist brew house. It's a original the 15-barrel Premier brew house. This is kind of like a brew pub system where we have the combi hot liquor tank and mash tun connected to each other. Not quite like a real production brew house where we've got all the separate tanks. We were able to get an additional hot liquor tank and cold liquor tank. So it helps us, especially in the summer, as the groundwater temperature heats up. It makes knocking out consistent throughout the year. So our knockout water is always the same temperature. But like I said, the mill is up there. You can see this auger that comes around and drops it into our mash tun. You guys have all seen breweries before, right? It's a pretty standard Premier system. It's one of the earlier ones they did. I want to say this brew house is probably like 10 or 12 years old. So there's a lot of little things that we've had to change over time. Yeah, I mean, there's 2,000 gallons of beer in there, so. That's some Diamond Dust that we brewed earlier this week. Yeah, so mash. Oh, his question? Oh, was this Iron Fist? Yeah, this was Iron Fist Brew House. Yeah, so we made some modifications to it. We added a whirlpool. This helps us immensely when we're doing multiple batches of beer at once, so we can be, as soon as we're done with boil, we can send the wort to the whirlpool and start lautering. So we can have 2 batches on the brew house at the same time. So we can brew 2 batches of beer in about 10 hours. 2 20-barrel batches of beer. All the Premier equipment is like, it's a 15-barrel brew house, but you can see our kettle is 22 barrels. So we can boil like 20, 21 barrels and water back at the end if we want to. We don't do any, yeah.
So if you're pushing the limits, do you ever use any anti-foam on that?
No, we don't like adding anti-foam on the hot side. Even our like hazy IPAs will add a little bit of hops at the beginning of the boil. So we'll have like really low alpha, like a 4% alpha hop, and we'll add like an ounce per barrel. It's like a very small amount, and that helps us to regulate the boil. Yeah, good question.
Are these markings in barrels?
It's barrels, yeah.
The cold liquor tank.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's not usual for brewery.
Yeah, cold liquor tank, it's really helpful for us just knocking out more consistently. It's really hard in the summer here. Groundwater gets up to like 80 degrees. So like if you're trying to knock out at 7, or God forbid you want to knock out water in the 50s. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we have a 2-stage heat exchanger. We have water and glycol, but there's only a few glycol plates, so you're only going to drop it so much. And then it heats up the whole glycol system, using electricity then to cool down your wort, and it's not like super efficient.
It's one of the reasons why Lambic Brew Session is in March.
Yeah, exactly. And
We do our big Lambic Brew in March because we
yeah.
do that in the ground using the groundwater.
Behind Sean's numbers 312.
Yeah, so those are batch numbers. So that's batch 312, 313, and 314. Yeah, so these are 60-barrel fermenters, 40s. So these 40s actually came from our other brewery at Miramar. These were kind of like the big fermenters that we had there. And then some smaller like 30s over there. So we have 11 fermenters here. So they're all in kind of stages of either fermentation, or we're prepping them to brew into the next couple of days. We have a pretty consistent pattern here where Monday we come in, clean the brew house, brew 30 barrels of our Blondale Tropical Mist, because it's a really good prop beer for our hazy IPA yeast. So we brew that almost every week just so we can have a propagation beer. We propagate all of our yeast in-house, and Tuesdays we're canning, because Mondays we're like centrifuging beers out of the tanks. Can show you that part here too. So once we're done at the brew house, goes in the fermenters, you add the yeast, and turns into beer. And this is the cool thing that we got 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago in November. This is a centrifuge, this is an Alpha Laval centrifuge. The really cool thing about this type of centrifuge, so as brewers get like older, they like stop talking about recipes of beer and start just only talking about equipment. So like all we do is nerd out about equipment. It's like, oh, how many horsepower is your glycol chiller? But this thing is super, super cool. I think it's made our beers a lot better. What it allows us to do is pretty much take a beer and we will crash it, and then like the next day we can send it through this and remove all the yeast and hops from it. So pretty much it has what's called a turbidity meter on it, which is a light sensor that tells you how hazy your beer is. We have a few references for a few of our brands for that, but the main thing we look for is every time we're running a beer, we're looking at the outlet of this and just checking if there's yeast in it. If we're right at that point where we just start to see something on the hemocytometer, we know that we're like right at the right place, because we don't want to be like stripping flavor out of the beer. We just want to make sure there's no yeast in it. That's the biggest thing. So all of our hazy IPAs, like there's no yeast in any of those. We're taking every single beer we make, making sure there's no yeast in it, and then we actually got it so we put a carbonation stone on the out of this, so we're actually carbonating in line into our brights, which is pretty cool. No, that's an inlet. It's an inlet valve. So this it looks at the outlet turbidity. So you'll like go into this is like, it's kind of weird. Like you'd think you'd have a touchscreen or something like that, but it's really this thing, and you just input numbers into it. Like these are all the codes for our flow rate, our CIP flow rate, our discharge turbidity, and we input the numbers to it, so it'll start changing the flow into it based off of the outlet turbidity. So it starts seeing the turbidity go up, and it'll slow down the infeed so it stays inside of the bowl longer. Yeah. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. It's a bitch to rebuild. You have to like take this thing apart every 2 years. The one at St. Archer, they have one of these, but it's like 4 times the size at St. Archer, and they had to build like a crane to be able to take the big like bowl out of it and all this stuff. It's pretty crazy. This one's not too bad.
So what rate can this process?
It does 2 cubic meters per hour. It's a hectoliter. It's 10 hectoliters per hour. So like 7 barrels an hour. But we can run, depending on the brand, like if we're putting a lager through this, we're going to be running it slower, like 1 to 2 cubic meters per hour. And if we're doing a hazy IPA, we're running it through like at 4 or 5. Yeah. Any questions about the brew house or anything like that? Sorry, we're kind of jumping around a little bit. Yeah. Not yet, but we're talking about doing it. We were talking with the Green CO2, I think is the name of the company. They got one over at Pizza Port Bresci. Yeah. I need to go check in with them again because last time I was asking them about it, they weren't too happy with it. But we are definitely getting away from like carbon credits, and we want to do actual like carbon recapture. The thing that we just did for energy reduction is you can see that box behind Rich is that used to be our cellar control panel. So if you into a brewery and you see all the like temperature readouts for all the tanks, that used to be on there, and now we have this system called Frigid Cloud that was created by these guys in Australia that allow us to pretty much remotely view our glycol usage, so all the black pipes coming down to the fermenter. We're able to control the temperature, made it so we can significantly reduce the amount of energy that we're using through a few different methods, and that's been really cool. So we've been working in real time with our electricity meter, luckily, because we have so many different panels from this being all different warehouses. Our glycol chiller, which is out here, it's like freaking massive. This thing is awesome. It's on its own panel. It's on its own sub panel, so we can see in real time our energy usage for the glycol, and that's been incredible. So that's like the big thing they've been working on right now. But CO2 recapture will hopefully come next year.
Do you guys have any solar on the roof?
No, not yet. So when we went to go get the lease for solar, our business listed as a restaurant. So because we're not like a manufacturing facility, they wouldn't give us like a manufacturer's lease on the solar panel. So we have to pay out of our pocket pretty much for the solar panel. So we're hoping that comes, but you guys kind of know where the state of the brewing industry is right now, so we are very hopeful to be getting the CO2 recapture and the solar going. Those are the 2 big things that we're working on. Yeah, exactly. So our hot liquor, we don't have steam here. We're our direct fire kettle, and then our hot liquor tanks are electric, and then we have on-demand water heaters. So most of the thermal energy that we're getting into our hot liquor is from our heat exchanger, recapturing hot water that we're using for cooling. That'll get us usually to about 160, 165 degrees, and then the last 30 degrees we're taking up with electricity. So hopefully that will get better with solar.
Notice anything different in direct fire versus steam, or make adjustments or something like that?
Yeah, it's definitely different. I've brewed on direct fire my whole entire brewing career, so I don't really know what the difference is. I know you get a little higher like Maillard reaction on direct fire, but I think that's kind of like in our beers. Like we use Pilsner malt. We use like get as low color as we can on a lot of our beers because we know we're going to pick up color on the hot side. Yeah.
Noticed the output hose of the kettle was packed with wort.
Yeah, Yeah, we actually only clean our heat exchanger once a week. It's crazy, yeah. We've never had any issues with it. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. Every time a new brewer starts working here, they're like, what, you're not going to like CIP the heat exchanger tonight? And I'm like, no, just leave it back for it. Because we know it's clean, right? But we do like a super deep clean on it once a week. And we pull it apart once a year. The one in Miramar can get kind of like packed up with hops and stuff like that over the course of the year. But the one up here, we took it apart last year and it looked great inside. Yeah. Who wants to try some? Oh, yeah.
I'm an electrician.
Yeah.
Drop cords for pump.
Yeah, pumps. Yeah, exactly. And I'm just we recently installed these bright tanks, and they, as you can see, they do not have the nicest finishing job on them compared to these tanks. So I'm waiting for the contractor to come back and finish these all up before I make all these cords look nice. So do not judge me. But yeah, power drops for pumps. The brew house pumps are, the CIP pumps are probably over there. Who's touching stuff over there? That's our kegging rig over there. So this is how we fill kegs. It's like the octopus.
That's exactly what it looks like.
Yeah, it's an octopus. So this is 8 kegging lines. They're attached to a manifold. So the really cool thing about this has auto stops on it. So when the keg is full, when the keg is full, this little ball pops up and shuts off the flow outlet of the keg, the gas outlet. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, exactly. It's great. It's like the best thing ever. Makes it so you can multitask a lot better instead of just like dumping beer all over the floor. Yeah, so as you can kind of see, we have a hodgepodge of tanks here. We've built this place over the last like 4 years. There's some Premier stuff, some Mark stuff. That Whirlpool came from another brewery. This came from a old school Gordon Biersch in Vegas or something like that. So this is like a super old school JV Northwest tank. You can see this like funky manway that's on here.
What's weird about this manway?
Yeah, I mean, like look at compared to like the standard manway. Yeah. Yeah.
I forgot that this was the original.
Yeah.
So, like, you had a blank slate?
No, it wasn't a blank slate. So you see how this cellar pad is kind of elevated compared to the rest of the floor. So this cellar pad was already here, but it wasn't coated. The floor is completely wrecked by chemicals. So we put out this epoxy sealant on here because the caustic and acids like eat up concrete really badly. So we pulled all the tanks off and put them over there, and then did the floors, then moved all the tanks back on here, built the glycol system, and brought some of our tanks up from Miramar. And then we actually didn't have any bright tanks here until last year. Yeah.
But the tanks, they're not the original ones from Iron Fist, right?
The Premier tanks are. So those 60s and then the 30s over here are original tanks. But like Iron Fist had their canning line over here. It was just all different. The 60s were like in this corner over here. We just moved everything around and added the Whirlpool, which was definitely like a big benefit for multi-brewing. Who wants to try the new Pale Ale? Yeah.
I don't want to get in the middle of it. So you brew some, and Miramar brews separate ones? Or
Yeah, so mainly right now, our head brewer of Miramar, he left last August. So I've just been brewing down there, keeping the mixed fermentation program alive. We weren't at full capacity up here yet, so pretty much we moved everything up here because everything's just way more efficient. Having a bigger brew house, especially having a silo now, but also having a centrifuge. Yeah, exactly. Like it takes so much more work to brew down there than up here. So last winter I brewed like 3 or 4 batches of beer down there, but then it was like I had to be down there every day doing cellar work and stuff, and then I'm not up here with everyone else, and then it's just, yeah, it's hard being. If they were like 15 minutes away from each other, it wouldn't be a big deal, but it's like a 40-minute drive. So if like, pretty much I'm like the maintenance guy for everything. So when something breaks, I'm the one, like, Winslow, come fix the lid dropper on the canning line. And I gotta like stop what I'm doing and then go fix yeah, that's my job here. Yeah, I'm the head maintenance guy. This is, we just centrifuged this today. This is, it's called NZ109. That's the name of the hop. If you guys want to.
So
It'll have a name soon. So the last one, NZ106, was Superdelic. No, it's usually the hop breeders and like the company itself. Oh yeah, anchovy. I haven't messed around with it, but I've heard good things. Yeah. Yeah. Just contains no anchovies.
It's very Nelson-esque.
Yeah, it has a really nice Nelson character, right?
Oh, wow. A lot of sort of white grape.
Yeah, it has that diesel too. Go for it. But nothing like super fresh beer. The other cool thing that we do for carbonating, we use these like flow meters for when we're carbonating beer. So we'll set the actual flow rate, and then we have a calculator that pretty much tells us how many liters of CO2 we need to finish carbonating the beer to get a certain amount of volume CO2, right? Yeah. So we take volume CO2 and the physical volume of the beer, and I built a calculator in Excel, and then we pretty much set a thing on here, and it tells you how long it'll take. We write a time on here, and you come back and check it at the time with the.
Does it work?
It works, yeah. Really cool. So this bright tank came from Second Chance, so we call it the third chance. We have not been able to get this off. We like keep trying to figure out what the right thing to take all this like tape off of here is. We haven't figured it out. Yeah, we just need to scrape it off. But. So this is a West Coast Pale Ale with NZ109, which is a experimental hop from NZ Hops, and Mosaic is the other half. We don't usually go full. There's very few hops that can work as like smash, right? So we always like to do something 50% because I mean it's a lot of beer. It's a lot of beer if the hop isn't good. It definitely has some Nelson characteristic with like the diesel. This is a characteristic I usually get off of Freestyle Nelson, but this was grown at Mac hops. But yeah, I like it. Yeah, we were all drinking it today, so. But something that we've been seeing is like the polyphenol haze from the hops. Like the New Zealand hops specifically have been giving us some weird polyphenol haze. So, I mean, this beer was centrifuged. There's no yeast in this beer. It's just hazy from the hops. And we could make it clear with the centrifuge, but we also know that we'd strip out a lot of flavor in that process. So I think people are accepting enough to, yeah. 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 So yeah, it's just Pilsner, the Great Western Pilsner, and I think like 10 or 15% white wheat, and some acid malt. Yeah. We also have really hard water here that's has a lot of residual alkalinity in it. So it makes our beers it promotes malt and hop character, as well as gives us a lot of Maillard reaction in the kettle. So like, even though this is 100% very light things, it still has some like color and malt body to it. But that's just like learning to work with the water that you have is the big piece of it. Yeah, we have a regenerative carbon filter over here. Yeah, and that's the keg washer. Yeah, there's a lot of different water sources. We're on like the Vista Ag water, so things will change. We do a water test in-house every week, and there's not really much we can do to take out things from the water, but we will adjust sometimes how much sulfate or chloride we're adding. But our hardness is like 400 here. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Our water is really, really hard. Yeah. Yeah, 400 TDS, yeah. The high. Yeah. Yeah, feel free to have some more if you guys want. I'm going to have some.
As long as you're offering.
The tax-free beer before it gets into the tanks.
You won't tell us so.
Yeah.
I redefined it. It's not beer till it's carbonated.
Yeah, it's fully carbonated. It's just at 32 degrees. So we're usually, as far as like dry hop beers, we're usually around like 2 volumes in the tank. As soon as we dry hop, we'll cap the tank and get whatever kind of natural carbonation we can get. And then we'll try and do as much carbonation in line I think this was almost fully carbonated by the time it came out of the centrifuge, so we just had to touch it up a little bit. So this is 2.6, 2.5, 2.6. It doesn't seem as carbonated because the beer is at like 32 degrees, so it'll, yeah. It never tastes as carbonated, and that can really bite you in the ass. So like when you're like carbonating things by taste, you'll sometimes way overshoot it, and then it makes canning like a really, really hard. Yeah, it makes it really hard. We can go look at the canning line next. Just turn, you guys know how to turn that off. Yeah, it's a valve. Just don't undo the tri-clamp and we'll be okay. Pretty good, right? Yeah, it's good, right? I'm pleased. The last one that we did, I think, was NZ 107. We weren't that stoked on it. I know. No one makes any pale ales. Well, as brewers, you know we can't drink 7% beer all day. I wish I could make all 3% beers, but no one would buy them. Yeah, 4%. Oh, yeah. I put them on left-handed. That's the trick, because we have no left-handed people, so I put them on left-handed. It's like 5.5. Yeah. So this is... Yeah. So I think the dry hop is probably, it's like around 3 pounds per barrel dry hop. Yeah. It definitely will have more aroma as it like warms up and sits. So this is the canning line. A lot of companies here in town, guys can kind of funnel in there if you guys want to look at it, but it's pneumatic scale Angelus. So like Harland has one of these, Version has one, Society has one. It's kind of it's like a higher end small canning line. They're a pretty good company. So the cans go into here. The depalletizer. We used to, in Miramar, we did this all like by hand and like hand loaded them. Yeah, depalletizer. So this is made by Ska Fab. They're the fabrication wing of Ska Brewing out of Durango, Colorado. They make a lot of really cool equipment. Really talented fabricators. So yeah, we put cans in here and it takes it up by layer and layer and pulls them off and then drops them through the twist rinse. And this thing is a date coater. So it'll spray the date on the bottom. It's a little laser jet, and then goes through the canning line. It's an open filler as opposed to some of the rotary lines, which are closed counter pressure fillers. So this is just filling them, and we're using the piercer over here to measure dissolved oxygen. So when we're first starting up the canning line, we get a beer going. You can do it by look. You want to be capping on foam. But sometimes it can be deceiving. Our target is under 50 parts per million. So we'll take cans and put them under here, and our QC guy will be like, okay, head 1 is at 80, head 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all under 50. Try and get some lower DOs on head 1. So there's a communication that goes back and forth between the canning line operator and the QC guy, and we're also weighing the cans to make sure that we don't have low fill. The big thing that the government is looking for as they're taking beer off the shelves is make sure it's not a low fill and make sure you're with an ABV spec. Those are the two biggest things that you'll get popped for. And weirdly, sometimes the calculations do not line up. So having a friend with an alkalizer machine goes a long way, because sometimes the calculations will just be off. Especially for imperial stout, on paper it'll be 16, 17% alcohol, and then you throw it through the alkalizer and it's 12. Yeah, we have a lab upstairs, so my office and the lab are that window up there. So we do plating in-house. All of our clean beers, we plate those after we bottle them to make sure that we don't have any infection. We do in-house yeast propagation. We go 30 generations on our yeast. We go along. Until it starts getting weird, we just keep it going.
How many generations?
30 plus. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because a pitch of yeast for the small tanks is $3-4 grand. Yeah. So if we can produce it in-house, that's really helpful. Right now, our house strains that we're using are diacetyl-free London 3 from Berkeley yeast and diacetyl-free Chico. Those are the two main ones, and then we just used Lallemand 3470. Fermentus? I always get mixed up. 3470. Everyone uses 3470, so. Yeah. So we have a few different sources of barrels, but one of the sources, we try to get some from Cutwater when we can, just because shipping gets really expensive from Kentucky. It all kind of comes from the same place. People won't tell you that, but it all comes from a distillery in Indiana. But we also get other special stuff. River Drive Cooperage is a really cool high-end place to get barrels. But yeah, we got some cool stuff in there. We already brewed we brewed our 10th anniversary beer like 2 years ago, and it was a 65 Plato beer. Yeah, it was so thick that like I didn't think it was fermenting because the CO2 couldn't escape solution when it was fermenting. It's really crazy, yeah. It finished at 30 Plato. Yeah, it's really crazy. So I'm really excited. So that's been barrel aged like multiple times. We're probably gonna put like two. Yeah, we're probably gonna put it in like 2 more. It tastes like just like burnt marshmallows right now, but it's gonna taste good in 2 years. I had the Bottle Logic guys try it like a year ago, and they're like, "This is gonna be really good in a couple years." I was like, "Okay, I trust you guys." Yeah. No, we actually try to inhibit fermentation. Like, we don't want them fermenting too much. For barrels, we're looking at 16 to 18 finishing Plato. So big and thick. A lot of also what I realized about making the beer thick was not just relying on high finishing gravity, but trying to get protein in there to help thicken the beer up. So it's kind of deceiving. Sometimes we'd like have a beer that would finish at like 12, 14 Plato, and we're like, oh, why does this beer have more body than the one that's like 20 Plato? So we realized at a certain point that it wasn't just about trying to chase like high finishing gravity. Healthy yeast is an important part. Just making sure your yeast is healthy. Yeah. No, we just kind of do standard size pitches. When we got our QC guy, we originally started brewing these. We had no QC guy. Our QC guy came in. He's like, "You're way under pitching these. You need to pitch by degree Platos and milliliters." And we're like, "Okay, do it." And they got way too dry. And we're like, "Okay, that's the reason why we're pitching them like that." Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it doesn't taste great when it's going into barrels, I'll be honest. But it takes time. And after it sits for about a year in oak barrel, it tastes pretty good. Yeah.
I have a question for you about your murky IPA.
Yeah.
You're using basically hard water.
Yeah.
In San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
But yet your murky IPAs are so soft.
Thank you.
Just like I had so many different
Yeah.
hazy IPAs and things like that where sometimes my criticism is that, oh yeah, but it's got a really rough finish.
It's like harsh. Yeah. Some of that comes from the hops. The centrifuge. Yeah, being able to remove the hop. So like when you're dry hopping at a high rate, like 3, 4, 5, 6 pounds per barrel, the hops themselves, the pelletized hops, when they're going through the hammer mill, it makes like a fine dust. So like if you ever like cut open a can of hazy IPA and look at the bottom, sometimes it's not yeast, sometimes it's like hop dust. It's just been stuck in suspension of the beer for so long, and then it comes out and eventually settles out. So yeah, I would just say let the beer sit for longer. We're pretty anti-fining agent here just because it strips out too much flavor. But I would just be patient. When you're working in 5-gallon scale, 10-gallon scale, and you're only like dealing with this much height, that's like a matter of like a week. For us, like this much height takes a long time for things to settle out. But just be patient. That would be my big recommendation, and try to get all the yeast and hops out of suspension.
We need a drinking game of every time you say be patient.
Yeah, be patient. Yeah, be patient.
Our whirlpool will naturally be a little bit cooler. We're around like probably 180 whirlpool. We lose like 10 degrees going into the whirlpool, and we try to, in the kettle, drop it about 10 degrees with a water back to be able to have it move more smoothly through the pumps. So we're at like 180 usually in the whirlpool. Yeah, we're doing like a pound per barrel in the whirlpool. Nothing crazy. Everything comes on the cold side with the hazies. That's like a big thing. I don't think most people aren't doing a lot of hot side stuff. I know a lot of people add nothing on the hot side for their hazies. You're gonna get a lot of flavor just dry hopping, really a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks so much, you guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming by. I love giving people a tour back here. Yeah.